Picture this. Medieval Europe, 1099. Christian knights storm Jerusalem's walls, shouting, "God wills it." Blood flows through streets as citizens fall to the sword. Meanwhile, in ancient Asia, Buddhist monks walked from village to village with nothing but robes and a bowl. They didn't conquer. They didn't convert. They just listened. In one part of the world, men slaughtered each other, shouting, "God wills it." In another, men sat in silence, conquering nothing but their own minds. Why this stark difference? Why did Christianity, Islam, and other religions raise armies for their gods, while Buddhism spread across continents without a single holy war? Buddhism operates differently from belief-based religions. It offers a testable system for understanding your mind. This distinction matters when we talk about why people fight holy wars. Before we dive deeper, a quick note. This video explores historical patterns of religious spread and violence. My intention isn't to criticize any faith tradition, but to understand Buddhism's unique approach to sharing ideas. Every tradition contains both peaceful and violent elements. I'm simply examining why Buddhism's spread followed a distinctive pattern. Armies, empires, and kings embraced Buddhist teachings and put down their swords, not because someone forced them to, but because the logic was just that convincing. And when I tell you about the bloodthirsty emperor who killed 99% of his family to gain power, but then became Buddhism's greatest champion, you'll understand why this system of thought never needed holy wars to become a global force. But here's the twist. There are Buddhist extremists today. So what went wrong? This is the untold story of how ideas, not armies, conquered half the world. Buddhism doesn't fit neatly into Western categories. This distinction matters especially when we talk about holy wars. We might argue Buddhism had no holy wars because it's not really a religion. But this misses the point. Buddhism has all the elements we associate with religion: monks, temples, rituals, scriptures, cosmology, and supernatural elements like rebirth. Millions of people worship the Buddha and pray to bodhisattvas for assistance. No, the absence of Buddhist holy wars can't be explained away that simply. There's something deeper at work. What's fascinating is that the Buddha never intended to start a religion at all. When asked if his was the only path to liberation, he responded with the parable of the raft. If a man crossing a river builds a raft and reaches the other shore safely, should he then carry the raft on his back wherever he goes? His revolutionary point: spiritual teachings are tools for crossing the river of suffering, not dogmas to be defended. The Buddha said, "Do not believe anything simply because you have heard it, or because it is written in your religious books. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to good, then accept it and live up to it." This differs radically from traditions where questioning core beliefs might be considered heresy. When you don't need others to accept your claims on faith, you don't need to force them to believe. Compare this to Christianity's spread through Europe. While Christianity initially expanded through persuasion during Roman persecution, after Constantine's conversion in 312 CE, imperial power became a primary vehicle for its growth. By the late 4th century, Christian emperors were outlawing pagan practices and destroying temples. Similarly, Islam's early expansion combined preaching with military conquest, creating vast empires where non-Muslims paid special taxes and faced various restrictions. Buddhism's different approach, emphasizing personal verification over belief, created fundamentally different patterns of expansion. Throughout history, religious conflicts have shaped our world, burning through civilizations, redrawing borders, and claiming countless lives. The Crusades stand as perhaps the most famous example. Pope Urban II launched the First Crusade in 1095 with a simple call: "God wills it." Christian knights marched thousands of miles to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim rule. When they finally breached Jerusalem's walls in 1099, the Crusaders slaughtered Muslims, Jews, and even Eastern Christians. One crusader, Raymond of Aguilers, wrote, "In the Temple of Solomon, men rode in blood up to their knees in bridle reins." But Christianity holds no monopoly on holy wars. Islamic expansion brought its own religious conflicts. The concept of jihad, though primarily meaning spiritual struggle, also justified military campaigns. Early caliphates expanded rapidly across North Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Europe, converting populations and establishing Islamic rule. In Europe, the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, pitted Catholics against Protestants in a devastating conflict that killed nearly a third of Germany's population, all because they interpreted the same holy book differently. Even Hinduism, often portrayed as peaceful, has its warriors. The Mahabharata describes a righteous war where the god Krishna tells the warrior Arjuna, "If you will not fight this righteous war, then you will fail in your duty, lose your reputation, and incur sin." So what drives people to kill in the name of God? The human toll of these conflicts is staggering. The Crusades killed perhaps 1 to 3 million people over 2 centuries. The 30 Years' War caused around 8 million deaths. The Pakistani-Indian partition in 1947, driven partly by religious differences, displaced 14 million people and killed up to 2 million. Religious wars typically share key ingredients: exclusive truth claims, divine authorization, and cosmic dualism, dividing the world into forces of good and evil. Religious warriors don't see themselves as killers, but as saviors. They're not conquering. They're liberating. They're not murdering. They're saving souls. Holy wars aren't just about territory or resources. They're existential battles for cosmic order. The stakes couldn't be higher: eternal salvation or damnation. So how did Buddhism avoid this pattern? Let's examine how Buddhism's unique approach to truth and practice made it fundamentally different. At Buddhism's core lies ahimsa, nonviolence. Not just a nice suggestion, but a fundamental principle. The very first precept that every Buddhist accepts is, "I undertake the training rule to abstain from killing." This isn't just about avoiding murder. It extends to daily choices about causing harm. A monk carefully watches his step to avoid crushing insects. A Buddhist layperson considers how their consumption affects other beings. This comprehensive approach to nonviolence permeates every aspect of life. According to Buddhist teachings, all beings tremble before danger, all fear death. When a man considers this, he does not kill or cause to kill. The Buddha rejected violence even in his own life. Born Prince Siddhartha, he abandoned the warrior caste and military training that was his birthright. When his own clan faced annihilation, he attempted to prevent the slaughter through peaceful intervention, standing between opposing armies. What makes Buddhism different is its relationship to truth and conversion. While most religions operate on faith and revelations, Buddhism operates on testing hypotheses about suffering. The Buddha claimed his teachings came from direct observation of how the mind works. As the Buddha expressed it, "Just as the wise test gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing it, so are you to test my words by examining them." Buddhism also introduced concepts like emptiness, sunyata, not nothingness, but the understanding that nothing exists independently or permanently. Imagine a wooden table. Is it really a table? Or is it wood, which came from a tree, which came from soil, sunlight, and water? Everything is interconnected, with no separate, permanent self. This realization dissolves the very logic that fuels religious conflict. If there's no permanent self to defend, and no essential difference between us and them, what exactly are we fighting for? But could such simple principles, nonviolence and inquiry, truly transform the heart of a killer and change the fate of an empire? History provides us a stunning answer in the form of one of humanity's most dramatic transformations. To appreciate Ashoka's transformation, understand the man he was before Buddhism. Court chronicles describe him as Chandashoka, Ashoka the Cruel, for good reason. He reportedly burned enemies alive, built a torture chamber called Ashoka's Hell, and eliminated 99 of his brothers to secure the throne. His armies were feared across the subcontinent for their brutality. 8 years into his reign, Ashoka launched his most ambitious conquest yet, against Kalinga, a prosperous independent kingdom in eastern India. The Kalinga War was particularly savage. Ashoka's own edicts record 150,000 people were deported, 100,000 were killed, and many more died. Imagine the scene. Fields of corpses, villages burning, families torn apart, all to satisfy one man's imperial ambition. Then something remarkable happened as Ashoka toured the battlefield afterward. The sight of corpses scattered across the land, the wailing of widows and orphans, the devastation of a once thriving region. It broke something in the conqueror. Standing amid the carnage he'd created, this ruthless emperor faced the ultimate question: was this power or merely destruction? In his own words, carved into rock for posterity, after the Kalinga War, the beloved of the gods, Ashoka, began to follow Dharma, to love Dharma, and to give instruction in Dharma. Now the beloved of the gods feels remorse for having conquered Kalinga. This remorse wasn't just a passing emotion. It triggered the most dramatic royal transformation in history. Ashoka embraced Buddhism and completely reversed his imperial policy. He abandoned conquest and dedicated his reign to spreading Buddhist principles through non-violent means. Instead of sending armies, he sent monks. Instead of building fortresses, he built hospitals. Instead of imposing military rule, he carved ethical principles into stone pillars across his vast empire. The Ashoka pillars and rock edicts, still visible today, proclaimed revolutionary ideas. One edict stated, "All religions should reside everywhere, for all of them desire self-control and purity of heart." This might be the earliest declaration of religious tolerance by a major ruler in history. Ashoka demonstrated that Buddhist principles could transform not just individuals, but entire empires. And he created a model for how Buddhism could spread through ethical example rather than military might. Ashoka's conversion showed Buddhism could transform even the most violent ruler. But can a philosophy spread across continents without armies carrying it? The answer lies in how Buddhism traveled the ancient highways of commerce. While many religions followed the sword, Buddhism followed the merchant's caravan. Trade routes became Buddhism's superhighways, especially the vast network we now call the Silk Road, connecting China to Central Asia, India, the Middle East, and eventually Europe. Let me take you to Dunhuang, China, around the year 600 CE. A weary merchant caravan arrives at the oasis after weeks crossing the Taklamakan Desert, their camels laden with silk and spices destined for Persia. The desert crossing has been brutal: sandstorms, bandits, and the constant threat of death by thirst. But here at the edge of China, something remarkable greets them. A complex of caves carved into cliff faces. Inside, magnificent Buddha statues reach toward the ceiling, walls covered in vibrant paintings depicting the Buddha's life. The travelers find not just shelter, but a place to deposit valuables, exchange currency, receive medical care, and restore their spirits before the next leg of their journey. A local monk approaches the lead merchant, offering tea. They share no common language, yet through translation, the merchant hears teachings that make sense to him regardless of his culture or background. The focus on ethical business practices, on reducing suffering, on finding inner peace amid the chaos of desert crossings. This speaks to his daily reality. Before departing, the merchant leaves a generous donation to expand the cave complex, ensuring future travelers will find the same refuge. Scenes like this played out again and again across Asia's trade routes. As historian Jerry Bentley noted, Buddhism traveled the Silk Roads in the wallets and saddlebags of merchants, not on the backs of warriors. Buddhism offered practical benefits for traveling merchants. Its emphasis on ethical conduct created trust between trading partners. Its monastery networks provided safe places to rest, store goods, and exchange currency. And its universal principles worked across different cultures and languages. Buddhism also excelled at cultural adaptation, unlike religions that demanded exclusive allegiance. Buddhism allowed practitioners to maintain local customs alongside Buddhist practice. The Buddhist concept of upaya, or skillful means, gave missionaries flexibility. They could present Buddhism differently depending on the audience, emphasizing philosophical aspects for the educated, meditation for the spiritually inclined, ethical teachings for rulers, and devotional practices for common people. Buddhism's journey along trade routes demonstrates how ideas can spread without conquest. But what happened when those ideas encountered established religions and deeply rooted belief systems? The story of these encounters reveals Buddhism's unique flexibility. When Buddhism encountered other belief systems, it typically sought harmony rather than conflict. But the outcomes varied dramatically. Buddhism's encounter with Islam proved more complex and sometimes tragic. Arab armies conquering Central Asia in the 7th and 8th centuries encountered flourishing Buddhist civilizations. Monasteries crumbled, libraries burned. The magnificent Bamiyan Buddhas in Afghanistan, destroyed by the Taliban in 2001, were first damaged during these early Muslim conquests. Why did Buddhism disappear from these regions? Not because Buddhists fought and lost holy wars, but because Buddhist institutions couldn't survive without royal patronage. The new Islamic rulers naturally favored their own faith. Throughout Southeast Asia, a different story unfolded. When Buddhism met indigenous animist traditions and Hinduism, remarkable synthesis occurred. Thai monks performed ceremonies honoring local spirits. In Myanmar, Nat worship continues alongside Buddhism. On islands like Java and Bali, Hindu and Buddhist elements blend seamlessly. In China, Buddhism encountered Confucianism and Taoism, two sophisticated philosophical systems deeply embedded in Chinese culture. Buddhist missionaries responded not with force, but with skilled translation. They used Taoist terms to explain Buddhist concepts, making ideas like emptiness, sunyata, accessible through comparison with Taoist non-action, wu wei. The result was a fascinating philosophical dialogue. Buddhism influenced Chinese thought, while being transformed into distinctively Chinese schools like Chan, Zen. Buddhism's journey to the West represents another fascinating chapter. When Buddhist texts first reached Europe in the 19th century, they influenced philosophers like Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. Unlike earlier religious encounters, Buddhism entered Western consciousness primarily as philosophy, rather than competing religion. In the 20th century, figures like Alan Watts, D.T. Suzuki, and later the Dalai Lama presented Buddhism to Western audiences not as a conversion target, but as a complementary practice. Many Westerners today practice Buddhist meditation while maintaining their original religious identity, a pattern of adoption rather than conversion that mirrors Buddhism's historical spread in Asia. This pattern of adaptation, rather than confrontation, characterized Buddhism's spread. It preferred dialogue over debate, inclusion over exclusion, and synthesis over conquest. But this peaceful history makes the exceptions all the more jarring, because there have been cases where Buddhism has been linked to violence and extremism, cases we need to examine honestly. If Buddhism promotes nonviolence so strongly, how do we explain Buddhist monks calling for violence against Muslims in Myanmar, or Sri Lankan Buddhists attacking Tamil Hindus? Now, to be clear, these violent voices do not represent all of Buddhism. Far from it. Across the world, most Buddhist monks, teachers, and practitioners remain deeply committed to compassion, peace, and non-harming. What we're examining here is how any tradition, no matter how peaceful, can be distorted when it becomes fused with fear, power, or nationalism. Let's start with Myanmar, where nationalist Buddhist monks led by Ashin Wirathu have fueled violence against Rohingya Muslims. Wirathu, once called the Buddhist bin Laden by Time magazine, founded the 969 movement to boycott Muslim businesses. His inflammatory speeches characterize Islam as an existential threat to Buddhism. His rhetoric helped spark violence that forced over 700,000 Rohingya to flee Myanmar since 2017, in what the UN has described as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. These monks didn't chant for peace, they chanted for purity. They didn't disarm delusion, they rearmed it. They didn't follow the Buddha's path of non-attachment. They clung desperately to nationalism. They didn't seek to end suffering. They perpetuated it. This isn't Buddhism as the Buddha taught it. It's Buddhism hijacked by the very forces it was designed to overcome: fear, attachment, and delusion. When Buddhist nationalists claim Buddhism will disappear if we don't defend it, they directly contradict the Buddha's teaching that hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is an eternal rule. As the Dalai Lama said regarding Myanmar, Buddha would have definitely helped the Rohingya Muslims. He would not discriminate. These cases of Buddhist nationalism can't be understood without colonial context. Myanmar and Sri Lanka experienced British colonization that privileged certain ethnic groups and religions over others, creating lasting social divisions. Japanese militarism emerged as a response to Western imperial dominance in Asia. Colonial powers often used religious differences to implement divide and rule strategies, hardening boundaries between groups that had previously coexisted. When these countries gained independence, religious nationalism became a way to assert post-colonial identity against perceived foreign threats. The exceptions we examined, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, wartime Japan, all involved Buddhism becoming entangled with nationalism. This fusion of religious and national identity creates a dangerous dynamic. A perceived threat to the nation becomes a threat to religion, and vice versa. These exceptions don't disprove Buddhism's peaceful track record. They highlight what happens when any belief system, even one founded on non-violence, becomes entangled with nationalism and identity politics. The Buddha's teachings included a built-in solution to such distortions: the practice of meditation itself, which creates internal conditions for peace. While other religions pray for peace, Buddhists train their minds for it. This isn't just spiritual talk. It's practical psychology backed by modern science. At Buddhism's core lies a simple but profound insight. Violence begins in the mind, with thoughts of anger, hatred, and division. So peace must begin there too. In the Buddha's words, all that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Let's try a brief experiment right now. Just for 20 seconds, notice your breathing. Feel the sensation of air entering and leaving your nostrils. When your mind wanders, and it will, gently bring it back to your breath. That pause? That was a seed of peace. In that space, no war can grow. What you just experienced is the foundation of Buddhist meditation, creating awareness of your mental processes. Now imagine extending this ability to moments when anger arises. You'd notice the anger, but wouldn't be controlled by it. This simple practice, scaled across millions of practitioners, creates a fundamentally different relationship to conflict than faiths focused primarily on belief. Buddhist meditation directly addresses the root causes of aggression. It doesn't just tell you to be peaceful, it trains your brain to respond differently to provocations. Modern neuroscience echoes what monks intuited centuries ago. Regular meditation physically changes the brain in ways that reduce aggression. Neuroscientists at the University of Wisconsin measured brain activity in experienced meditators. They found increased activity in areas associated with positive emotions and reduced activity in aggression-related areas. Even in war zones, meditation creates islands of peace. During Cambodia's bloody civil war, monk Maha Ghosananda led peace walks through active combat areas, teaching meditation to villagers caught in the crossfire. One refugee described the impact. Before meditation, when I thought of the Khmer Rouge killing my family, I wanted to take revenge. After meditation, I still see my family killed, but I don't feel the same hatred. This transformation, from vengeful victim to peaceful survivor, represents Buddhism's most profound gift to humanity. Not just a philosophy, but a practical path from hatred to healing. This built-in technology for peace gives Buddhism a unique advantage in preventing violence. It doesn't just prohibit aggression, it systematically uproots its psychological causes. After thousands of years, through empires and upheavals, Buddhism spread without swords. But what can this ancient strategy teach us now, in a world still addicted to conflict? First, ideas spread better through attraction than coercion. Buddhism didn't conquer half of Asia with armies. It won hearts and minds by addressing real human suffering. Second, Buddhism shows the power of adapting to local cultures without compromising core principles. Buddhism didn't demand that Chinese people stop being Chinese or Tibetans abandon their cultural identity. It offered tools that could work within existing frameworks. Third, Buddhism demonstrates that focusing on practice rather than belief creates more stable foundations. Instead of demanding allegiance to unprovable claims, Buddhism offers techniques you can verify through personal experience. Fourth, Buddhism reveals the danger of mixing spiritual traditions with national identity. When spiritual practices become markers of national or ethnic identity, the universal message gets corrupted into an us versus them mentality. Fifth, Buddhism shows how internal transformation precedes external peace. The Buddhist approach recognizes that social change begins with individual minds. Now imagine if the world's most entrenched conflicts were approached not with flags or faith, but with one guiding question: how do we reduce suffering? Of course, these conflicts are incredibly complex, rooted in history, identity, trauma, and pain on all sides. We're not here to take political stances or simplify them, but from a Buddhist lens, we can ask, how might a different kind of thinking, focused on reducing suffering rather than proving who's right, shift the conversation? Take, for instance, the long-standing conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Both sides claim exclusive divine rights to the same land. What if, instead, they followed the Buddha's approach of non-attachment to views? What if they prioritized reducing suffering over establishing who has the right claim? Or consider Ukraine and Russia, a conflict partly fueled by competing historical narratives and identity claims. A Buddhist approach would ask, how can we minimize suffering right now, rather than who is historically right? Perhaps most importantly, Buddhism demonstrates that peace isn't just a goal, it's a strategy. The Buddha taught that means and ends are inseparable. Peaceful ends require peaceful means. Violent methods inevitably corrupt even the noblest objectives. In a world still torn by religious and ideological conflicts, Buddhism's peaceful spread reminds us that the most powerful revolutions begin not with swords, but with insights. Ideas once carried in begging bowls now shape entire nations, not by force, but by awakening. Now that you've seen how Buddhism spread across continents without holy wars, I invite you to experiment with these principles in your own life. Try a simple 5-minute meditation. Notice how your mind works when you're angry. See if creating space between emotion and action changes your responses to daily frustrations. You don't need to become Buddhist to benefit from these insights. The Buddha's approach to peace works regardless of your beliefs. If you found this exploration valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to Buddha's Wisdom for more videos that bring ancient wisdom to modern challenges. In the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you experienced the peace that meditation brings? Do you see parallels between Buddhist spread and other peaceful movements? Until next time, may you find peace within yourself first, and help create it in our troubled world. Thanks for watching Buddha's Wisdom. I'm Matt, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay curious, stay kind, and may your insight be your revolution. Peace is the highest bliss. The Buddha.